What up, YouTube? Welcome back. You know what time it is? It's that time of the year when Apple has a phone and Google has a phone and you're sitting there with your credit card just waiting to give them your money. Should I do it? I feel like I should. I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna give you 5 reasons why you should maybe think about holding off on that purchase just a little while longer. Reason number 1, the letter S. Well, this doesn't quite apply to iPhones anymore, but back in the day when iPhones were single-digit model numbers, they would often release an S version shortly after the initial version, and this would almost always be that version of the phone, but to its full potential. And this happened every single time, but every single time people would go out and buy the non-S version. And this always baffled me. If you're buying a phone and you're going to keep it for 3 to 5 years, which is the average amount of time people keep their phones, I think, then why wouldn't you just wait for the S version and cycle up every time the S version comes out? Now, this doesn't apply to iPhone anymore, but a lot of phone manufacturers do this. And apart from just the S version, they might also just release newer colors, more interesting versions, slightly beefed up versions. Either ways, in many cases, just waiting a little while gives you access to the best version of that phone. And you've got to understand, companies already know that they have the best version available. They just don't put it to market because it does 2 things for them. One, it allows them to create more sales. They sell the base version and then they sell the hyped up, beefed up version, maybe for the same money, maybe for a little bit more money, but a few months down the line. Either ways, they also stay in the news cycle that way. So it's really beneficial to them. But simply by knowing this, I feel like you and I can game the system just a little bit. Reason number 2 is new technology. Now, Google's new Pixel lineup of phones this year at least has something called Tensor technology, which is basically Google's attempt at making their own SoC, their own processors, which might be amazing, but it may also not be. Basically, it's an unknown. It's completely new, and when it comes to new tech, the first version is quite often not quite up to scratch. Take for instance NVIDIA's RTX GPUs. When NVIDIA first brought out these GPUs, they had the RTX 20 series and they touted ray tracing. And it worked, it did have ray tracing, but it came at such a great penalty of performance that quite often it wasn't worth turning it on. So you would just use it as a normal graphics card without ray tracing. Fast forward a year and they released the 30 series, the second iteration of the ray tracing cards, and these ended up having more than 50% more performance than their predecessors. So anyone who waited a year would get the actual full potential of the RTX cards. Of course, it's unfortunate that at the end of the day, there was a big silicon shortage and the 30 series cards ended up being bonkers expensive. But the point is, this is not just NVIDIA, this happens across the board. Even Apple's M1 chip, the first generation was pretty good, but it's nowhere close to how good it's going to get in the next couple of generations. And if you've got something that already works, then maybe you want to wait for the second generation of that product. And the same concept would apply to Google's Tensor chipset as well. Reason number 3 is support. Now, when the Google Pixel 3 had launched, I don't know if you know this, but a lot of people who had broken their phone screens by dropping them, which happens to all of us, couldn't actually get replacements because when the phone came out, Google had not ordered enough replacement screens, so even if you were willing to pay for it, you couldn't get your screen replaced. And what's more, because it was a new phone, third-party manufacturers had no solution for you, not just yet. So a lot of Pixel 3 users, at least the ones that had broken screens, were left without a working phone for weeks, maybe even months, until replacements eventually came. Now, with the case of smartphones, for most people, we only use one smartphone at a time. We don't carry multiple devices. So if your one smartphone, which you rely on so heavily, doesn't work or can't be repaired, then isn't that a problem? And in the same vein, reason number 4 is bugs and kinks. Ask anyone who upgrades to Windows or Mac OS on day 1 of launch, and they'll tell you that it's a bit of a pain, and sometimes it's just not worth it. Sometimes it's even disabling. But you can roll software back. It's not that simple with hardware. Take for instance the PlayStation 5. When it came out, it's not a cheap gaming device, but it did have some bugs which actually rendered it unable to play some games, actually a lot of games for a lot of people. But for some people, there was a bug that actually bricked their device, rendered it completely dead and inert. That's a gaming console. It's not exactly primary to your life. A smartphone, on the other hand, is pretty darn important to a lot of people. Now, if there's one thing that's common between all the 4 reasons I just gave you, it's uncertainty. Anytime there's a new device, especially with new technology in it, There's far too much uncertainty at launch. We just don't know whether it'll work or whether it'll work as advertised, as promised, or if you're a conscientious user, if you're willing to spend your money, even then it might not be the best bang for buck, not the first generation at least. Now, the other thing that's common between the 4 things I talked about is actually YouTube. Online publications and sites like YouTube have made it possible for you to now do your research beforehand. You can just go to your favorite YouTubers, this guy, right? It's gotta be me, right? There's a little subscribe button over there. If it's not, just smash it, just hit it. Anyway, the point is you can choose the YouTubers that you respect and collate their opinions and make a more informed decision if you just hold off for a bit. And finally, before I let you go, reason number 5, and perhaps the most important reason of all, that device in your hands right now might still work just fine. In fact, it might be working really, really well. Now, I know some people will have phones where the battery life is just not good enough anymore, or the screen is having some issues, and so on and so forth. The things you can't repair and you need to buy a new phone, fine. I get that completely. But for everyone else, be honest with me. Heck, be honest with yourself. Is that device really not working? In fact, if you can comment down below and tell me where your device is noticeably showing you a lack of performance, noticeably showing you a degradation, I'd be very interested to know. Because here's the thing, if you buy a phone every year or 2 years, which is really quite quick, then you're creating a demand. So the more you demand, the more they'll make and the more resources and materials they'll use. On the other hand, you selling your old phone will mean somebody else will use it for a while until it becomes so obsolete that somebody will decide to trash it. And even if it is recycled, most of the parts of a mobile phone still end up in landfills. Maybe it's worth holding on to that old phone for a little while longer. Either way you cut it, all the 5 reasons I've stated show that at the very least, we should wait a little while and not buy things at launch straight away. Do a little research, make an informed decision, and maybe even give it a pass and not buy a phone this year, not buy the first version of any phone. Just something to think about. I'll see you in the next one. Stay happy, stay peaceful, stay colorful. Namaste. Google Pixel 6 Pro pre-order. What? Hey, I have to make content. I'm doing this because I have a YouTube channel, okay? And if you made it this far, you may as well smash that subscribe button if you haven't done so already. If you have done, smash it. Wait, don't click it again. That'll unsubscribe. Just don't do that.